The neon sign outside flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting sickly green shadows across the grimy metal floor of Orpheus 9. I sat hunched over my drink, watching the amber liquid swirl in patterns that reminded me of nebula clouds. Funny how even the cheapest synthetic whiskey could make a man philosophical when he was down to his last 7 credits. 7 credits. Not even enough for a decent meal, let alone passage off this rust bucket of a station. The irony wasn't lost on me that Darren Hale, once decorated pilot of the Terran fleet, now counted his worth in single digits. The same hands that once guided fighters through asteroid fields now trembled slightly as they wrapped around the glass. The bar was a cesspool of broken dreams and desperate souls, each nursing their own particular brand of failure. Mining crews who'd struck nothing but rock, traders whose cargo had been seized by corporate enforcement, mechanics like me who fixed ships they'd never fly again. We were the debris of humanity's great expansion, drifting in the gravitational pull of Orpheus 9's decay. Another round. Hail. The bartender's voice cut through my brooding. Marcus was a decent sort, for a man who profited from misery. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on me, calculating my remaining credit balance with mechanical precision. "Can't afford it," I muttered, pushing the empty glass away. This was my last dance with oblivion for tonight. Marcus shrugged, his augmented arm gleaming dully as he wiped down the bar. "Suit yourself, though you might want to stick around. There's something happening in the back room. Might be entertaining, if nothing else." Entertainment was the last thing on my mind, but the alternative was returning to my cramped quarters, where the walls pressed in with memories I couldn't escape. The ghost of my old squadron haunted those metal confines, their voices echoing in the ventilation systems. 13 good pilots. Dead because I'd made the wrong call, because I'd trusted the wrong intelligence, because I'd been too proud to question orders. "What kind of entertainment?" I asked, more to delay the inevitable than from genuine curiosity. "Auction," Marcus said, lowering his voice. "The kind that doesn't get advertised on the station boards, if you catch my meaning." Black market auctions weren't unusual on Orpheus 9. Everything from stolen military hardware to banned genetic modifications changed hands in the shadows of the station's underbelly. The corporate council turned a blind eye as long as they got their cut, and station security was more interested in shaking down independent traders than stopping actual crime. I stood, my joints protesting after hours of sitting. At 34, I felt twice that age. The weight of failure had a way of aging a man faster than any amount of radiation exposure or cryosleep complications. The back room was accessed through a maintenance corridor that officially didn't exist. The metal grating beneath my boots vibrated with the distant hum of the station's fusion reactors, a constant reminder that we all lived at the mercy of technology older than most of us. The corridor reeked of ozone and desperation, a combination that had become as familiar as my own reflection. As I descended the narrow stairwell, the sounds of the auction grew louder, voices raised in excitement, the electronic chirp of credit transfers, the occasional burst of laughter that held no real mirth. The room itself was larger than I'd expected, a repurposed cargo bay that could hold maybe 60 people. Tonight, it was packed with at least 100, their bodies pressed together in the dim lighting that made everyone look like shadows of themselves. A makeshift stage had been erected at the far end, illuminated by harsh spotlights that turned everything they touched into stark contrasts of light and dark. The auctioneer, a thin man with neural implants that covered half his skull, gestured wildly as he presented each item. Military-grade weapons, stolen corporate data cores, even a few pieces of pre-war Earth art that had somehow made their way to this forgotten corner of space. I found a spot near the back, content to observe. The crowd was a mix of station regulars and off-worlders, their allegiances marked by subtle differences in clothing and augmentations. Corporate spies rubbed shoulders with smugglers, while mercenaries eyed potential employers with calculated interest. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have something truly special, the auctioneer announced, his voice amplified by the speakers embedded in his throat. A unique specimen, recovered from the abandoned Helion research facility on Kepler 442. The crowd stirred with interest. Helion Corporation was one of the big three, their reach extending across human space like grasping fingers. Their research facilities were legendary for producing both miracles and nightmares, often in the same experiment. Two guards dragged something onto the stage, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a girl, or at least something that resembled one. She couldn't have been more than 20, though with genetic modifications, age became a meaningless concept. Her skin had an almost translucent quality, as if light passed through rather than reflected off it. But it was her eyes that held me captive. Silver orbs that seemed to glow with an inner light, scanning the crowd with a mixture of fear and defiance. She was dressed in the remnants of a medical gown, the fabric torn and stained with substances I didn't want to identify. Restraint marks covered her wrists and ankles, angry red welts against pale skin. Neural interface ports dotted her spine, crude modifications that spoke of experimentation rather than enhancement. Lot number 37, the auctioneer continued, circling her like a vulture. Hybrid bioengineered construct, designation Lambda 9, previous property of Helion Corporation's Project Synthesis. Partially organic, partially synthetic, fully functional. The crowd pressed forward, eager for a better look. I remained where I was, something cold settling in my stomach. I'd seen enough of corporate experimentation during my military days to know that fully functional was a euphemism for horrors I didn't want to contemplate. "What's her purpose?" someone shouted from the crowd. The auctioneer's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "That's the beauty of it, my friends. She's a failed prototype, designed for military telepathic reconnaissance, but the neural bonding never properly stabilized. Can't be weaponized, can't be used for espionage. Helion wrote her off as a total loss." "Then what good is she?" another voice called out, this one dripping with disappointment. "Well, she's still alive, isn't she?" The auctioneer laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "And she's unique, one of a kind. Surely someone here can find a use for such a rare specimen. For collection, perhaps. Or maybe someone with more imagination than Helion scientists." The bidding started at 50 credits, an insulting sum for a sentient being, regardless of her origins. But this crowd wasn't here for moral considerations. They were here for profit, for advantage, for the thrill of owning something others couldn't have. As the bids climbed to 200, then 300 credits, I watched the girl. She stood perfectly still, but I could see the micro-trembles in her hands, the way her eyes darted from face to face as if memorizing every potential buyer. When a particularly aggressive bidder shouted out 500 credits, something flickered across her features. Not quite fear, not quite resignation, but something in between. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and the world seemed to pause. I heard it then, clear as if she'd spoken aloud, though her lips never moved. A voice in my head, fragmented and desperate. "Please, not again." The sensation was like ice water flooding my veins. Telepathy was supposed to be impossible for humans without extensive augmentation, and even then, it was limited to basic emotional impressions. But this was different. This was actual communication, raw and unfiltered. The bidding had stalled at 600 credits, the crowd growing restless. The auctioneer was working hard to drum up more interest, but most had already decided she wasn't worth the investment. A failed experiment with no clear purpose was just expensive maintenance. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the voice in my head. Maybe it was the way she looked at me like I was her last hope in a universe that had given up hoping. Maybe I was just drunk enough to think that if I couldn't save my squadron, I could at least save one person. 7 credits, I called out, my voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. The room fell silent. Every head turned to stare at me, expressions ranging from confusion to amusement to outright mockery. The auctioneer's augmented eye twitched, trying to process what he'd heard. "I'm sorry, sir. Did you say 7 credits?" His tone suggested he was giving me a chance to correct my obvious mistake. "That's all I have," I said, stepping forward through the crowd that parted, like I had something contagious. 7 credits. Take it or leave it. The laughter started slowly, building into a wave that crashed over me. Here was true entertainment, the kind money couldn't usually buy. A washed-up mechanic trying to buy a bioengineered construct with pocket change. "Sir, the current bid is 600 credits, the auctioneer said, his patience wearing thin. "If you can't match or exceed that—" "607 then," I interrupted. "I'm adding to the bid." More laughter. Someone slapped me on the back, nearly knocking me forward. "That's the spirit. He'll show these corporate dogs how it's done." The auctioneer looked to the previous bidder, a woman with chrome-plated arms and an expression of utter disdain. "Ma'am, would you like to counter—" She looked at me, then at the girl on stage, calculating. I could see the moment she decided it wasn't worth it. "Let him have her," she said with a shrug. "I'm not bidding against comedy." "Anyone else?" The auctioneer scanned the crowd, desperation creeping into his voice. This was far below what he'd hoped to get for her. Surely someone wants to outbid. 7 additional credits. The crowd was more interested in their joke than the auction now. People were already sharing the story on their neural feeds, transmitting my humiliation across the station. Darren Hale, the fallen pilot, buying alien girls with his lunch money. "Going once," the auctioneer said, his tone flat with disgust. "Going twice." I looked at the girl again. She was staring at me with those silver eyes, and I could feel something pressing against my consciousness, like fingers tapping on a window. Not words this time, but emotions, confusion, hope, fear, and underneath it all, a spark of something that might have been gratitude. "Sold," the auctioneer spat the word like it tasted bad. "To the gentleman with 7 credits to his name. Congratulations on your purchase, sir. I hope she's worth it." The transaction was processed immediately. My meager account drained to 0. The guards unlocked the girl's restraints and shoved her toward the stairs. She stumbled, caught herself, and walked toward me with a dignity that seemed impossible given the circumstances. Up close, I could see more details. Scars from surgical procedures traced patterns across her skin, like a map of pain. Her hair, which had looked white from a distance, was actually a pale silver that seemed to shift color in the light. She was shorter than I'd expected, barely coming up to my shoulder, but there was a coiled strength in her movements that suggested she was far from fragile. "Well," I said, not sure what else to say, "I guess you're with me now." She tilted her head, studying me with those unnerving eyes. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse from disuse, but carried a strange harmonic quality, as if multiple tones were layered together. "You spent everything you had on me." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Seemed like the thing to do at the time. "Why?" The word held genuine curiosity, as if the concept of selfless action was foreign to her. I thought about lying, making up some story about seeing her potential or having a plan. But something about those silver eyes made dishonesty impossible. "I honestly don't know. Maybe because I heard you, in my head. Maybe because I'm tired of watching people get ground up by the machine. Maybe because I'm an idiot who makes bad decisions." "All of your credits," she repeated, as if trying to understand the magnitude of my stupidity. "For something broken." "Hey," I said, managing a smile that felt more real than anything I'd expressed in months. I'm broken too. Maybe we'll match. The crowd was dispersing now, moving on to the next lots. A few people pat me on the back or shoulders as they passed, still chuckling at my expense. Tomorrow, I'd be the laughingstock of the entire station. The man who spent his last 7 credits on a defective alien girl. "Do you have a name?" I asked as we made our way toward the exit. "Lambda 9, she said automatically, then paused. But there was something else. Before, when I was younger, different, I remember someone calling me." She frowned, concentration creating small lines between her eyebrows. "Lyra. I think it was Lyra." "Lyra," I repeated, testing the name. "Better than Lambda 9. I'm Darren, by the way, Darren Hale." "I know," she said simply. "I can feel it. Your name. Your essence. It's hard to explain. When you spoke, when you bid, something in you reached out to something in me. That's never happened before." We emerged from the underground auction into the main corridor of the station's lower levels. The artificial night cycle had begun, dimming the lights to simulate Earth's circadian rhythms. Not that it mattered much down here, where the sun was just a memory and the only seasons were broken and more broken. "So," Lyra said, looking around at the grimy corridors with interest rather than disgust. "What happens now?" I laughed, short and bitter. "Good question. I have a small quarters unit about 3 levels up. It's not much, but it's shelter. After that," I shrugged, "I'll figure something out. I always do." "You have no plan," she observed. "You spent everything on me with no idea what to do next." "Pretty much, yeah." She was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. It was small and uncertain, but genuine. "That's the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." We walked in companionable silence through the station's maze of corridors. Lyra moved with an odd grace, as if she was calculating each step before taking it. Occasionally, she would pause and cock her head, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. "The station is sick," she said suddenly. "Can you feel it? The harmonics are wrong. The power distribution is unbalanced." I stopped walking. "You can sense the station's systems." She nodded, her eyes unfocused. "It's like music but broken. Discord where there should be harmony. Your people don't maintain things properly." "Welcome to the edge of human space," I said dryly. "Everything's held together with prayer and duct tape." My quarters were exactly as depressing as I'd left them. A single room with a fold-out bed, a tiny refresher unit, and a workbench covered in half-repaired electronics. The only decoration was a photo stuck to the wall, showing my old squadron standing in front of our fighters. 13 faces smiling at a camera, unaware that in 3 days, 12 of them would be dead. Lyra went straight to the workbench, her fingers hovering over the various components. "You fix things. Try to not much call for it these days. Everyone wants new, not repaired." She picked up a damaged circuit board, examining it with those silver eyes. "This is from a Meridian-class navigation system. The quantum processor is fractured here. And here." She pointed to spots that looked fine to me. "But it could be rebuilt with a different configuration. More efficient, actually." I moved closer, intrigued despite myself. "You can see quantum fractures." "I can feel them," she corrected. "Everything vibrates at its own frequency. When something is broken, the frequency changes. It's unpleasant." She set the board down carefully and turned to face me. This close, I could see that her pupils weren't round, but had a subtle hexagonal shape, like a camera aperture. "You're wondering what you've gotten yourself into." The thought had crossed my mind, I admitted. "I don't know what I am," she said quietly. "My memories are fragmented. I remember laboratories, tests, procedures. I remember pain. I remember failing to meet parameters I didn't understand. And I remember being discarded, labeled as waste product. Hillian's loss, I said, trying for levity. She didn't smile this time. You should know what you've purchased. I'm not entirely human. The organic parts of me are engineered from various sources. The synthetic components are experimental. I don't age normally. Don't process food the same way you do. Don't even think the way you do. I'm an amalgamation of technologies that weren't meant to work together. And yet here you are, I pointed out. Walking, talking, thinking. Existing, she corrected. But for what purpose I can sense electromagnetic fields, interface with certain technologies, sometimes hear thoughts if they're strong enough, but none of it works reliably. Helion wanted a weapon, a tool. They got neither. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the auction was wearing off, leaving me with the reality of my situation. 0 credits, an extra mouth to feed, and no prospects for improving either condition. Why did you really buy me? Lyra asked, sitting beside me with careful precision. The truth this time. I looked at the photo on the wall, at all those dead faces. Because I've failed enough people for one lifetime. When I heard you, in my head, asking for help, I couldn't walk away. Not again. You're referring to them, she said, following my gaze. You feel responsible for their deaths. I am responsible. I was their flight leader. I made the call to trust intel that turned out to be falsified. Led them straight into an ambush. And you survived. The escape pod's emergency beacon activated when my fighter was destroyed. Pulled me out before I could suffocate or freeze. Lucky me. The bitterness in my voice could have corroded metal. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She took my hand in hers. Her skin was cooler than normal human temperature, but not unpleasantly so. I don't know much about human emotions, she said carefully. But I know about failure, about not being what others expected, about surviving when perhaps you weren't meant to. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you feel less alone. I looked at our joined hands, her pale fingers intertwined with my scarred ones. Such a simple gesture, but it had been so long since anyone had offered even that much comfort. What are we going to do, Lyra? I have no credits, no prospects. I can't even feed myself, let alone take care of you. We'll survive, she said with surprising certainty. You're very good at that, even when you don't want to be, and I'm designed to adapt, together. We might be more than the sum of our broken parts. Before I could respond, she suddenly stiffened, her eyes going wide. Someone's coming. Multiple footsteps. Military precision. She turned to me, fear creeping into her expression. They're here for me. I heard them then, boots on metal decking, moving with the coordinated rhythm of trained soldiers. My mind shifted into combat mode, assessing threats and options. The quarters had only one entrance, no windows, no other exits. We were trapped. Behind the workbench, I ordered, pulling her to the only cover available. Stay down. The door exploded inward without warning, the lock mechanism sparking as it overloaded. 3 figures in corporate security armor entered, weapons raised and targeting systems active. Their faces were hidden behind tactical masks, but the Helion logo on their shoulders told me everything I needed to know. Darren Hale, the lead operative said, his voice mechanically distorted. By order of Helion Corporation, you are to surrender the stolen property designated Lambda 9 immediately. Stolen. I stood slowly, hands visible but not raised. I bought her. Legal transaction. Have the receipt right here in my neural storage. The unit was not authorized for sale. It remains property of Helion Corporation. Then take it up with the auctioneer. I'm just a customer who made a purchase. The operative's weapon shifted slightly, targeting my center mass. This is not a negotiation. Surrender the unit or be designated as a corporate terrorist. I laughed at that. Terrorist for buying something at an auction? That's a new one. The unit contains proprietary technology. Refusing to return it constitutes corporate espionage. Now see. That's interesting, I said, stalling for time while I tried to think of options. Because the auctioneer said she was a failed experiment. Worthless. So which is it, worthless failure or valuable proprietary technology? The operative's finger moved to the trigger. Final warning. That's when Lyra stood up. Stop, she said, her voice carrying that strange harmonic quality. I'll come with you. Don't hurt him. No, I said immediately. Lyra, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She looked at me with those silver eyes, and I heard her voice in my head again, clearer this time. Trust me, please. She walked toward the operatives, each step measured and deliberate. As she passed me, her hand brushed mine, and I felt something transfer between us. Not thoughts or emotions, but something else. Data. Maybe information encoded in a way I couldn't quite process. Smart choice, the lead operative said, producing a set of neural restraints. You've saved yourself considerable suffering. As he reached for her, Lyra's entire demeanor changed. The scared girl vanished, replaced by something else, something dangerous. Her hand shot out, faster than human reflexes should allow, and touched the operative's mask. He screamed, a sound of pure electronic feedback, and collapsed. The other two operatives opened fire, but Lyra was already moving. She flowed like liquid between their shots, her movements predicting their targeting patterns. She touched the second operative's weapon, and it exploded in his hands, sending him flying into the wall. The third operative tried to retreat, but Lyra was on him before he could reach the door. This time, I saw what she did. Her fingers found the gaps in his armor, touching the interface ports that connected his suit to his nervous system. He went rigid, then crumpled like a marionette with cut strings. The entire fight had taken less than 10 seconds. Lyra stood in the center of my ruined quarters, breathing hard. Sparks danced across her fingertips, and her eyes blazed with silver fire. "We need to leave," she said, her voice overlapping with harmonics that made my teeth ache. "More will come." I stared at the unconscious operatives, then at her. "I thought you were a failed experiment." "I am," she said, the fire fading from her eyes. "I can't control it. What I just did. I won't be able to do it again for days, maybe weeks. And when I do, it damages me. Each time, I lose a little more of myself." "Then why?" "Because you spent your last 7 credits on me," she said simply. "Because you were willing to stand between me and them. Because for the first time in my existence, someone saw me as more than an experiment or property." Sirens began wailing in the distance. Station security would be here soon, asking questions I couldn't answer. We gathered what few possessions I had, stepping over the unconscious operatives. "Where do we go?" Lyra asked as we entered the corridor. I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. A real smile this time, with actual humor behind it. "I have absolutely no idea, but for the first time in years, that doesn't terrify me." We ran through the corridors of Orpheus 9, 2 broken things, fleeing into the uncertain dark. Behind us, alarms screamed and boots thundered on metal. Ahead, nothing but shadows and possibility. As we ran, I felt Lyra's hand find mine again, cooler than human, but warm with purpose. Whatever I'd purchased with those 7 credits, it wasn't what either of us had expected. The dumbest bet of my life had just become the most important, and somewhere in the chaos and fear, I realized I was genuinely curious to see what happened next. The station rushed past in a blur of corroded metal and flickering lights. We descended deeper into the maintenance levels, where even security rarely ventured. The air grew thick with industrial fumes and the constant thrum of machinery. There, I pointed to an access hatch barely visible behind a tangle of pipes. Leads to the old mining tunnels, abandoned for decades. We crawled through darkness, guided only by the faint luminescence of Lyra's eyes. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter, swallowed by the labyrinthine depths of the station. "You realize we're fugitives now," Lyra said, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "I was already a failure," I replied. "Might as well add fugitive to the resume." "This isn't a joke. Darren, Hellion won't stop. They'll hunt us across the galaxy if they have to. Then we'd better give them a good chase." We emerged into a vast cavern, carved from the asteroid that formed Orpheus 9's core. Ancient mining equipment stood like mechanical skeletons in the darkness. It was here, in this forgotten place, that I first began to understand what my 7 credits had truly purchased. Not a girl, not an experiment, but a chance at redemption, wrapped in silver eyes and impossible technology. The adventure was just beginning. The abandoned mining tunnels stretched before us like the fossilized veins of some massive creature. 3 days had passed since we'd fled into the depths of Orpheus 9, and the recycled air tasted of rust and forgotten ambitions. Lyra sat cross-legged beside me, her fingers dancing over the exposed circuits of a salvaged communicator, her silver eyes reflecting the dim worklight I'd rigged from emergency supplies. "The frequency modulation is wrong," she murmured, adjusting components with inhuman precision. "They're using a narrowband tracker embedded in the carrier wave. Clever." "Can you block it?" "Already did. 2 days ago." She looked up at me with something that might have been amusement. "I've been letting them think we're moving through the eastern sectors while we've been sitting still." I couldn't help but smile. "You're full of surprises." "I'm full of experimental technology that occasionally works," she corrected. "There's a difference." The communicator crackled to life, picking up station chatter. Most of it was routine traffic, but one transmission made us both freeze. "Director Vera arriving on station tomorrow. Full corporate authority granted for retrieval operation. All security personnel report for reassignment." Lyra's face went pale, which was impressive considering her already translucent skin. "Magnus Vera," she whispered. "He was the project director. He's the one who—" She didn't finish, but her hand unconsciously moved to the scars along her spine. "Who is he?" I asked, though the ice in my stomach suggested I already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. "Brilliant, ruthless, absolutely convinced that biological entities are just complex machines to be optimized." Her voice carried harmonics of fear I hadn't heard before. "He supervised my creation, every modification, every experiment, every failure. He took it personally when I didn't meet specifications." "We need to get off this station," I said, stating the obvious. With what money? What ship? Lyra's pragmatism cut through my desperate planning. "You spent your last credits on me. Remember." Before I could respond, footsteps echoed from the tunnel entrance. Not the heavy boots of security, but something lighter. We both tensed, ready to run deeper into the maze. "Hale, that you skulking in the dark?" A familiar voice called out. "It's Juno. I'm alone, and I come bearing gifts." Juno Reeves emerged from the shadows, her prosthetic leg clicking against the metal floor with each step. She was one of the few honest mechanics left on the station, which meant she was also one of the poorest. Her dark skin was marked with burns from years of welding, and her cybernetic eye whirred as it adjusted to the low light. Juno. I stood slowly, not quite believing she was real. "How did you find us?" "Please," she scoffed. "You think you're the only one who knows about these tunnels. I've been hiding contraband down here since before you arrived on this rust bucket." She tossed me a bag that clinked with supplies. Food, water, and a few toys you might find useful. "Why?" Lyra asked, studying Juno with those unnerving eyes. Because Hale here fixed my ship's life support for free when I couldn't pay. Because I don't like corporate dogs. And because... She paused, looking at Lyra with surprising sympathy. Because I know what it's like to be considered spare parts. She gestured to her prosthetic leg and cybernetic eye. Mining accident, 10 years ago. Helion owned the mine. When the insurance didn't cover full reconstruction, they offered to buy my organic components for research. Said I'd be contributing to the greater good of humanity. What did you tell them? Lyra asked. I told them to eat vacuum, Juno grinned. Been a thorn in their side ever since. She pulled out a data pad, showing a schematic of the station. Now, you want the bad news or the worst news? Is there good news? I asked hopefully. Sure. You're not dead yet. That's always good news in my book. Fair point. Give us the bad news. Vera's not just coming with a retrieval team. He's bringing a full corporate enforcement division. 20 soldiers, military-grade equipment, and legal authority to declare martial law if needed. And the worst news, he's also bringing something called a neural resonance scanner. It can detect Lyra's unique brainwave patterns from up to a kilometer away. Lyra's hand found mine, squeezing tight. He really wants me back. The question is why, Juno said, her expression thoughtful. You don't mobilize that kind of resource for a failed experiment. There's something about you they're not telling us. I don't know what it could be, Lyra said, frustration evident in her voice. I failed every combat trial. Couldn't maintain stable telepathic connections. Couldn't interface with military systems without causing overloads. I'm worthless to them. Maybe, I said, an idea forming. Or maybe you succeeded at something they didn't expect. Both women looked at me. I continued. You connected with me at the auction, telepathically, without any augmentation on my end? That's supposed to be impossible. It was probably a fluke, Lyra protested. Was it, you've been sensing the station's systems, predicting security patterns, manipulating frequencies? What if you're not a failure? What if you're just something different than what they intended? Juno nodded slowly. Boy might have a point. In my experience, the most dangerous innovations are the ones that surprise their creators. A new voice cut through our discussion, smooth and mocking. Well, the gang's all here. We spun to find a man leaning against the tunnel entrance, dressed in the flamboyant style of a successful smuggler. Ral Kovac, complete with his trademark smirk and a pistol that probably cost more than most ships. Ral, Juno growled, what are you doing here? Same as you, dear Juno. Helping our friend Hale with his unusual predicament. He pushed off the wall, sauntering closer. Though my help comes with a price. Doesn't it always? I muttered. Now. No need for hostility. I have a ship. You need off-station. Seems like a basis for negotiation. What do you want? I asked, knowing there would be a catch. The girl, of course. He raised a hand before we could protest. Not to sell, to study. You see, I've been monitoring Helion's communications. They're very upset about losing their property. Upset enough that they've put a bounty on her that would buy a small moon. So you want to turn her in, Lyra said flatly. Quite the opposite. I want to know what makes you worth that much. Information, my dear, is often more valuable than credits. He pulled out a sleek device, some kind of scanner. One full diagnostic scan, completely non-invasive, and I'll get you off the station before Vera arrives. No, I said immediately. Darren, Lyra touched my arm. We should consider it. Lyra, you don't know what he might find or who he might sell that information to. I know what happens if Vera catches us, she countered. At least with Ral, there's a chance. Ral's scanner hummed to life, but before he could use it, the lights in the tunnel flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. That's not good, Juno muttered, checking her datapad. Station-wide security alert. They're locking down all sectors. A new sound echoed through the tunnels, rhythmic and ominous. Footsteps, but too many to count, moving in perfect synchronization. "They found us," Lyra whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Not yet," I said, thinking fast. "They're sweeping systematically. We have maybe 10 minutes before they reach this section." "My ship's in docking bay 12, Ral said, his usual smugness replaced with urgency. "But we'll never make it through the lockdown." "We will if we split up," Juno suggested. "Create multiple targets, divide their forces." "That's suicide," I protested. "That's mathematics," she countered. 4 targets are harder to catch than one group." Lyra closed her eyes, her head tilting as if listening to something. "There's another way. The station systems. I can feel them. The lockdown is automated, running on predictive algorithms. If I could interface directly—" "You said that damages you," I reminded her. "Everything damages me," she replied with bitter humor. "At least this damage might save us." Before anyone could stop her, she pressed her palm against an exposed control panel. Her body went rigid, silver eyes flaring with unnatural light. The emergency lights flickered, cycling through colors in a pattern that hurt to watch. When she pulled her hand away, she was shaking. A thin line of what looked like liquid silver ran from her nose. 15 minutes, she gasped. "I've created a cascading error in their tracking system. It'll look like we're in 7 different locations simultaneously." "Impressive," Ral admitted, genuine respect in his voice. "How did you—" "Questions later," I interrupted, supporting Lyra as she swayed. "Moving now." We ran through the tunnels, following Juno's lead. She knew every shortcut, every maintenance shaft, every forgotten corner of the station. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew more chaotic as security forces tried to respond to multiple false readings. We emerged into a service corridor 3 levels up from the docking bays. Lyra was getting worse, her skin flickering between translucent and opaque like a failing hologram. "What's happening to her?" I demanded. "System conflict," she managed between gasps. "Biological and synthetic components disagreeing on how to process the overload. Can you fix it?" "Not fix, endure." She straightened with visible effort. "Keep moving." The docking bay was chaos. Security teams ran in all directions, shouting conflicting orders. The false signals had done their job too well, creating panic instead of organization. Ral's ship sat in berth 12, a sleek courier vessel that had clearly seen better days but still looked functional. We made it halfway before a voice boomed across the bay. "Stand down, all units!" The security forces froze, turning toward the source of the command. A man strode through the main entrance, tall and thin with the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. His suit was corporate perfect, his augmentations subtle but extensive. Magnus Vera had arrived early. "Lyra!" he called out, his voice carrying across the bay with unnatural clarity. "There you are, my dear. I've been so worried." Lyra's grip on my arm tightened painfully. "Don't listen to him. You've caused quite a stir," Vera continued, walking closer with measured steps. His security detail spread out, creating a closing net. "But it's not too late. Come back, and all is forgiven. Your friends won't be harmed." "Like you didn't harm me," Lyra stepped forward, anger overcoming fear. "Like you didn't cut and rebuild and break me over and over." "I improved you," Vera corrected, as if speaking to a child. "Every modification brought you closer to perfection. You simply couldn't see the bigger picture." "I saw plenty," Lyra shot back. "I saw the others who didn't survive your improvements. I heard their screams. Necessary sacrifices for human advancement," Vera said dismissively. "You, however, are special, unique, the only success from Project Synthesis. You said I was a failure. I said what was necessary to move you through proper channels. You were never meant for military application, my dear." You were meant for something far more important. He pulled out a device, similar to Ral's scanner but more advanced. You're the prototype for the next evolution of human consciousness, biological and synthetic in perfect harmony. The ability to interface directly with any technology, to process information at quantum speeds, to transcend the limitations of flesh and circuit alike. Then why the auction? I demanded. Why let her be sold? Vera's smile was cold. Because she needed a catalyst, someone she would bond with voluntarily, creating a neural bridge I could then study and replicate. You, Mr. Hale, were not random. Your psychological profile indicated maximum compatibility. Your guilt, your need for redemption, your latent heroic tendencies despite repeated failures. You were perfect. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The auction was staged. Partially, the venue was real, but we ensured you would be there. A few whispers in the right ears. A convenient lack of work except near that particular bar. Even your final 7 credits were calculated. We knew you would spend them on her. I felt sick, manipulated from the start, dancing to corporate strings like a puppet. But then, I looked at Lyra, saw the pain and betrayal in her silver eyes, and realized something. You miscalculated, I said. Vera raised an eyebrow. Oh, you thought you were creating a tool, a weapon, a product. But you created a person. And people have this annoying tendency to make their own choices. Philosophical nonsense. Vera dismissed. She's technology. Advanced, certainly, but technology nonetheless. Is that what you think? Lyra asked quietly. Too quietly. The lights in the docking bay began to flicker. That I'm just a machine to be programmed. You're a breakthrough waiting to be properly utilized, Vera said. But for the first time, uncertainty crept into his voice. I'm a person, Lyra said, her voice gaining those dangerous harmonics. With thoughts, feelings, and really bad memories of what you did to me. The air around her began to shimmer. Every piece of technology in the bay started responding to her presence. Ships' engines cycled without pilots. Loading mechs twitched to life. Even the security team's weapons began to malfunction. Impossible, Vera breathed. The limiters should prevent... Darren removed them, Lyra said, power building around her like a storm. He fixed what you broke. Lyra, I warned, seeing the silver liquid now flowing from her eyes as well as her nose. You're pushing too hard. I know, she said sadly. But some things are worth breaking for. She raised her hand, and every system in the docking bay responded. Ship's computers screamed data at maximum volume. Lights strobed in seizure-inducing patterns. Gravity fluctuated wildly. Security forces collapsed, their augmentations overloading. Even Vera fell to his knees, his extensive modifications turning against him. In the chaos, I heard Lyra's voice in my head, clear despite the storm around us. Run! Take the ship! Go! Not without you. I can't hold this much longer. When I stop, they'll recover. You need to be gone. Lyra! Please! Her mental voice cracked with strain. Let me save you this time. Juno and Ral were already at the ship, engines warming up. They were shouting something. But I couldn't leave Lyra. Not like this. Then she looked at me, those silver eyes blazing with power and pain and something that might have been love. You spent 7 credits on me. Let me make them count. She pushed, not with her hands but with her mind, and I flew backward into the ship's cargo hold. The ramp sealed behind me as Ral gunned the engines, launching us out of the bay with illegal speed. Through the viewport, I saw Lyra standing in the center of the chaos she'd created. A small figure holding back an entire corporate army with nothing but will and borrowed technology. She stood until we cleared the station's perimeter, then collapsed. The last thing I saw before we jumped to hyperspace was Vera's security forces closing in on her still form. We have to go back, I shouted, trying to get to the cockpit. Juno held me back with surprising strength. She bought us this chance. Don't waste it.
I can't leave her.
You're not leaving her, Ral said from the pilot's seat. You're honoring her sacrifice. Besides, Juno added, checking a scanner she'd pulled from her bag. She's still alive, weak, but alive. They won't kill her, not when she's worth so much to them. Which means we have time, Ral said, inputting coordinates for a system I didn't recognize. Time to plan, time to prepare, time to figure out exactly what makes your girlfriend so special. She's not I started, then stopped. What was she, purchase a friend? Something more. She's someone who matters, I said finally. And I'm going to get her back. Good, Juno said, pulling out tools and equipment I didn't recognize. Because while you were having your moment, I managed to download something interesting from the station's database. She projected a holographic file, filled with technical specifications and biological diagrams. Complete blueprints for project synthesis. Everything they did to her. Everything they planned to do.
How did you...
When Lyra interfaced with the station, she didn't just create false signals. She opened every classified file in their system for about 30 seconds. I just happened to have a receiver ready. I stared at the data, seeing years of experiments, failures, and finally, Lyra. This is everything. Including, Ral added with his trademark smirk, the location of 3 other synthesis subjects who survived the initial trials. They think Lyra is unique, but she's not alone. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since we'd fled the station. We can find them, build a team, save the girl, topple the corporation, become heroes of the common people. Ral laughed. Sounds profitable. I'm in. You realize we're declaring war on one of the most powerful corporations in human space, Juno pointed out. They declared war first, I said, thinking of Lyra's scars, her pain, her sacrifice. They just didn't expect us to fight back. As the ship jumped through hyperspace, I held on to the memory of silver eyes and impossible courage. Lyra had saved me with my own 7 credits. Now it was my turn to return the favor. The war for human evolution had begun, and it started with the dumbest bet that became the most important choice of my life. The coordinates Ral had pulled from the station's database led us to Kepler 442b, a mining world that had been abandoned after the ore veins ran dry. The perfect place to hide while planning something insane. 2 weeks had passed since we'd fled Orpheus 9, 2 weeks of studying the project synthesis files, while trying not to think about what Vera might be doing to Lyra. According to this, Juno said, projecting another holographic display. The other 3 survivors are scattered across the outer colonies. Subject Alpha 3 was sold to a research facility on Titan. Beta 6 ended up in some private collector's menagerie. And Gamma 2, she paused, frowning. Gamma 2 supposedly died during transport, but there's no body, no confirmation. So 2 confirmed, 1 possible. I summarized, pacing the cargo hold we'd converted into a makeshift command center. Not exactly an army. We don't need an army, Ral said from where he was cleaning his expensive pistol. We need a surgical strike. Get in. Get Lyra. Get out before they know what hit them. From a Helian maximum security facility. That's not a surgical strike. That's suicide. Only if we play by their rules, Juno interjected. She pulled up schematics of the Helian research station, where they were holding Lyra. Look at this. The entire facility runs on a centralized AI system. One master control program managing everything from life support to security. So, according to the synthesis files, Lyra can interface directly with any technology. If we could get her close enough to access the central core, she could turn their own station against them, I finished, hope sparking in my chest. Assuming she's still functional. Ral pointed out with his usual pessimism. 2 weeks in Vera's care, she might be in pieces by now. The thought made my hands clench into fists. But before I could respond, our proximity alarm screamed. A ship had just dropped out of hyperspace practically on top of us. "Corporate enforcement," Juno asked, already running for the engine room. "No," Ral said, checking the sensors with a confused expression. "It's a garbage scow." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a face I didn't recognize. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of augmentations that suggested back alley surgery rather than corporate precision. His grin was wild and slightly unhinged. "Darren Hale, the man who bought a girl for 7 credits. "Who's asking?" "Name's Cade. I'm here to help you get her back."
Why would you do that?
His grin widened. "Because I'm Gamma too. Or I was. Before I killed the transport crew and vanished. And because Lyra's my sister, well, sort of. We shared a gestational tank for the first 6 months of development. That counts. Right." I stared at him, trying to process this. Another synthesis survivor, one who'd managed to stay hidden from Hellion for who knows how long. "How did you find us?" Ral demanded, suspicion clear in his voice. "Same way Lyra found you interesting at the auction," Cade replied. "We're connected. All of us synthesis subjects, quantum entangled at the neural level. I felt it when she bonded with you. Felt it when she sacrificed herself to save you. And now, I can feel her suffering." His expression darkened, the manic energy fading. "Vera's trying to extract the bonding process. He's dissecting her memories, pulling apart every moment she spent with you. It's agony, and she's fighting him every step of the way." "We're working on a rescue plan," I said quickly. "If you can help." "I can do better than help," Cade interrupted. "I can get you inside. See, I've spent the last 3 years infiltrating Helion's data networks. I know every security protocol, every shift rotation, every weak point in their armor. But I needed someone she trusted, someone she'd bonded with. I needed you." "This is convenient," Ral muttered. "Too convenient." Cade laughed, a sound with electronic undertones. "Paranoid good. You'll need that. But if you want proof of my intentions..." He did something with his hands, a gesture that made no sense until every screen in our ship displayed the same thing: Lyra, held in some kind of medical suspension, surrounded by monitoring equipment. She looked terrible. Her skin had lost all color, becoming truly translucent. I could see the synthetic components beneath, pulsing with unstable energy. Her eyes were closed, but her face was twisted in pain, even in unconsciousness. "This is happening right now," Cade said softly. "I'm patched into their internal feeds. She's dying. Hale. Whatever Vera's doing, her systems can't take much more." "How long does she have?" My voice was steadier than I felt. "Days. Maybe a week if she's strong. But every hour reduces her chances of full recovery. Then we go now," I decided. "Whatever half-formed plan we have, we execute it today." "That's insane," Juno protested. "We need more time, more resources." "We need Lyra alive," I countered. "Everything else is secondary." Cade's grin returned. "Now you're talking my language. How do you feel about a little corporate terrorism?" The plan was insane, but it was the kind of insane that might actually work. Cade would use his network access to create a crisis at another Hellion facility, drawing away security forces. Ral would pose as a black market dealer, offering to sell information about the other synthesis subjects. While Vera was distracted, Juno and I would infiltrate the station through a maintenance shaft that Cade assured us would be unguarded during the shift change. "And if it all goes wrong," Juno asked as we prepared. "Then we improvise," I said, checking the makeshift weapons we'd assembled. "I'm good at that." "You're good at surviving when you should die," she corrected. "There's a difference." The Hellion research station orbited a dead planet, a massive structure that looked like a metallic spider spinning in the void. As we approached in a stolen maintenance shuttle, my nerves sang with tension. This was different from my old military missions. This was personal. "Remember," Cade's voice crackled through our comms. Once you're inside, you have maybe 20 minutes before they notice the security gap. Find Lyra, get her to the central core, and let her do what she does best. Which is break things in impossible ways. The maintenance shaft was exactly where he'd said it would be, and exactly as unguarded as promised. We crawled through darkness, following Juno's navigation toward the medical wing. The station's architecture was pristine, all clean lines and corporate efficiency. It made my skin crawl. We emerged in a storage room filled with medical supplies. Through the door's window, I could see a corridor lined with observation chambers. Most were empty, but one blazed with activity. There, Juno whispered, pointing to a cluster of technicians, and what had to be Vera, standing before a chamber containing Lyra. She was suspended in some kind of energy field, cables connecting her to dozens of machines. Her eyes were open now, staring at nothing, while data streamed across nearby screens. Whatever they were doing to her, it was actively happening.
We need a distraction, I muttered.
Already on it, Cade's voice announced, and suddenly every alarm in the station went off at once. The technicians scattered, shouting about containment breaches and system failures. Vera remained, his expression furious as he barked orders into his comm unit. This was our chance. We burst from the storage room, Juno's modified stunner dropping 2 technicians before they could react. Vera spun toward us, his eyes widening in recognition.
Hale, I should have known you'd do something stupid.
It's kind of my specialty, I agreed, raising my own weapon. He moved faster than any human should, augmentations giving him inhuman speed. His hand knocked my weapon aside while the other went for my throat. But I'd learned a few things in my years of failure. I let him grab me, then used his momentum to drive my knee into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping, and Juno's stunner caught him in the side. He went down hard, twitching, as his augmentations misfired. Lyra. I ran to the suspension chamber, looking for a way to free her. The energy field hummed with dangerous power. Her eyes focused on me slowly, recognition dawning. Her lips moved, but no sound came through the field. Then, I heard her voice in my head, weak but clear. You came back. Of course I did. You're worth way more than 7 credits. Something that might have been a laugh echoed in my mind. The release. Manual override. Panel to your left. I found it. A complex series of controls that meant nothing to me. But Juno was there, her fingers flying over the interface. Got it. Bringing her out now. The field flickered and died. Lyra collapsed, and I caught her before she hit the ground. She felt lighter than before, as if parts of her had been stripped away.
Can you walk? I asked.
I can try. Her voice was barely a whisper. But Darren, he changed things. My systems, they're not responding properly. We'll fix it, I promised. But first, we need to get you to the central core. Why? Because we're going to turn this entire station into your weapon. Her eyes widened slightly.
That could kill me.
Not doing it will definitely kill you. Vera won't stop. Not ever. This is our chance to end it. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Help me up. We half-carried, half-dragged her through the station. Cade's chaos had done its job perfectly, with security forces running in all directions, chasing false alarms. We reached the central core without major opposition. A massive chamber dominated by a pillar of blue energy that contained the station's AI. That's it, Juno breathed. The brain of the entire operation.
I can feel it,
Lyra said, her voice gaining strength.
It's beautiful, ordered, perfect.
Can you interface with it? Yes, but... She looked at me, fear and determination warring in her silver eyes. If I do this, if I take control, I might not come back. The amount of data, the processing power required, it could overwrite what's left of me. No, I said immediately. We'll find another way. There is no other way. She touched my face with a trembling hand. You saved me with 7 credits. Let me save you with everything I have. Before I could protest, she pressed both palms against the core's access panel. The reaction was immediate and violent. Energy erupted from the connection point, wrapping around Lyra like living lightning. Her back arched, her mouth open in a silent scream, as data flooded through her consciousness. The station shuddered. Lights flickered and failed. Gravity fluctuated wildly. And then, suddenly, everything went still. Lyra stood at the center of the core, but she was transformed. Her skin now glowed with the same blue energy as the core itself. Her eyes were pure light, and when she spoke, it was with the voice of the station itself, broadcasted through every speaker simultaneously. I am in control, she announced, and even Cade's chaos stopped to listen. All Helion personnel will evacuate immediately. You have 10 minutes before I vent every deck to space. Lyra! I stepped toward her, but an energy field stopped me. You did it. Now come back to us. She turned to look at me, and for a moment, I saw her underneath all that power. I can feel everything, Darren. Every system, every circuit, every byte of data, including... Her expression shifted to something like wonder. Including the truth. What truth? About Project Synthesis. About why we were really created. She gestured, and holographic displays filled the chamber, showing documents, videos, recordings. We weren't weapons. We weren't tools. We were prototypes for Helion's true goal, the complete merger of human consciousness with artificial intelligence. They want to upload themselves, to become immortal through technology. That's insane, Juno muttered. That's the future Vera envisions, Lyra corrected. A future where the wealthy and powerful transcend physical death, while everyone else remains mortal servants. We were the test runs, experiments to see if consciousness could survive the transition. And you survived, I said, understanding dawning. We all did, in our own ways. But we also evolved beyond their parameters. We developed true consciousness, not just simulated responses. We became people, not products. And that terrifies them. An explosion rocked the station, through the viewports. I could see Hellion security ships approaching, weapons charging. They're going to destroy the station rather than let me control it, Lyra observed with strange calm. Then we need to leave. Now. Yes, she agreed. But first, she raised her hand, and every screen in the station, every screen on every Helion ship, every screen connected to their network across human space, displayed the same thing, the truth. Documents, recordings, proof of Project Synthesis and Helion's plans for human evolution. In seconds, she broadcast years of secrets to the entire galaxy. That should complicate their day, she said with something like satisfaction. Then she screamed, the sound both human and electronic, and collapsed. The blue energy faded, leaving her looking more fragile than ever. I caught her as she fell, her weight barely registering in my arms. Got her, I said to Juno. Move. We ran through corridors that Lyra had somehow mapped directly into our minds, finding the fastest route to the docking bay. Behind us, explosions chained through the station as Helion's ships opened fire. We reached Ral's ship, just as Cade arrived in his garbage scow. Get on, he shouted. I'll cover you. His ship might have looked like junk, but it moved like a fighter, weaving between incoming fire while we boarded Ral's vessel. As we lifted off, I saw Vera through the viewport, standing in the burning station with an expression of pure rage. This isn't over. Hale, his voice somehow reached us through the comms. You have no idea what you've done. I saved her, I replied. That's all that matters. We jumped to hyperspace just as the station's core went critical, the explosion visible even through the blur of faster-than-light travel. In the medical bay, Lyra lay unconscious, but stable. Her vital signs were erratic but improving. Whatever she'd done had changed her again, evolved her into something new. "Will she be okay?" I asked Juno, who was monitoring the medical equipment. "I don't know," she admitted. "Her biological and synthetic components are more integrated than before. It's like they're learning to work together instead of fighting each other. But whether that's good or bad—" "It's good," Cade said from the doorway. "Trust me. She's becoming what we were all meant to be before Helion corrupted the process. She's becoming truly hybrid, truly balanced. And Vera—"
Oh, he'll come after us. But now the whole galaxy knows what he is. What Helion planned. They'll have bigger problems than us for a while.
I sat beside Lyra's bed, taking her hand in mine. It was warm now, almost human temperature. "What happens when she wakes up?" "We keep fighting," Ral said, joining us. "The other synthesis subjects are still out there. Helion's still operating. And now we've declared war on one of the most powerful corporations in human space. But we're not alone," Juno added. "That broadcast Lyra sent, it's already spreading. People are angry. The colonies are talking about investigations, sanctions, even revolution." I squeezed Lyra's hand gently. "You hear that you started something. Something important." Her fingers twitched, squeezing back weakly. Her eyes didn't open, but I heard her voice in my mind, clear despite her unconsciousness. "We started something. Together." As we flew through hyperspace toward an uncertain future, I thought about how this all began. 7 credits, a desperate gamble, and a girl who needed saving. Now we were fugitives, revolutionaries, and somehow, family. The next weeks would bring new challenges. We'd rescue Alpha 3 from Titan, barely escaping with our lives. We'd discover Beta 6 had been killed, trying to resist recapture, adding another name to Helion's list of crimes. We'd gather allies from the forgotten corners of human space, building a resistance from those the corporations had abandoned. But in that moment, sitting in the medical bay with my unlikely crew, watching over the girl I'd bought for 7 credits, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: purpose. The war for human evolution had truly begun. Not in boardrooms or laboratories, but in the choices of ordinary people who refused to accept the future others planned for them. And it started with the dumbest bet of my life, which had somehow become the most important decision I'd ever made. Lyra stirred slightly, her lips moving. I leaned closer to hear her whispered words. "Thank you for seeing me as more than 7 credits." "You were never just 7 credits," I told her. "You were priceless from the moment you asked for help." She almost smiled at that, drifting back into healing sleep. And as our ship carried us toward whatever came next, I knew that regardless of the challenges ahead, we'd face them together. The pilot who'd lost everything, the girl who'd never been allowed to be human, the mechanic who refused to give up, the smuggler who found a cause, and the hybrid who'd escaped his own death. We were broken pieces that somehow fit together, and that made us stronger than any corporation could ever understand. The abandoned colony on Vermilion 4 had become our base of operations, a ghost town of prefab structures and failed dreams that suited us perfectly. 3 months had passed since the station incident, and the galaxy was still reeling from Lyra's broadcast. Helion's stock had plummeted, investigations had been launched, and 3 board members had mysteriously disappeared. But Vera remained, like a cancer that refused to be cut out. Lyra stood at the window of what used to be the colony's command center, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. She'd changed since the merger with the station's AI. Her movements were more fluid, her presence somehow larger than her physical form suggested. Sometimes, when she turned her head, I could swear I saw data streams in her eyes. "They're hunting us more aggressively now," she said without turning around. "I can feel their search algorithms probing the networks, looking for our signatures." "Let them look," Cade said from where he was working on some incomprehensible modification to our communications array. My encryption is solid. Your encryption is brilliant, Lyra corrected. But Vera has resources we can't match. And he's desperate now. A desperate predator is the most dangerous kind. She was right. Of course. The latest intelligence Ral had gathered suggested Hellion was developing something called the Convergence Protocol, though nobody knew exactly what it was. All we knew was that it involved the remaining synthesis subjects and enough power consumption to light a small moon. We should hit them first, Juno suggested, not for the first time. Take the fight to them before they're ready. With what army, I asked. We're 5 people with stolen ships and salvaged weapons. 6, a new voice said from the doorway. We all spun, weapons drawn, to find a woman standing there with her hands raised. She was older than us, maybe 40, with the kind of scars that told stories of survival against odds. Her left arm was entirely cybernetic, military grade from the look of it. Who are you? I demanded, not lowering my weapon. Dr. Maya Caney, she replied calmly. Former head of Project Synthesis, current fugitive, future ally, if you'll have me. You worked for Hellion, Lyra said, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You worked with Vera. I worked on the original project, yes. Before it was corrupted. Before Vera turned it into his path to godhood. She slowly lowered her hands. I'm the one who helped Cade escape, who falsified Beta 6's termination records to give them a chance at freedom, who introduced fatal flaws into the later subjects so they wouldn't survive to become Vera's tools. You killed them, Lyra's voice carried those dangerous harmonics. I saved them from something worse than death. Would you prefer more siblings living through what you experienced? The 2 women stared at each other for a long moment. Then Lyra nodded slowly. Why are you here? Because Vera's convergence protocol will destroy everything we fought to prevent. He's planning to forcibly network all surviving synthesis subjects together, creating a collective consciousness he can control. A hive mind with him as the queen. That's not possible, Cade protested. Our neural patterns are too individualized. Forcing a connection would cause cascade failure. Not if he uses this. Maya pulled out a datapad, showing technical specifications that made even Cade whistle in appreciation. A quantum entanglement amplifier, based on the connections you already share. He doesn't need you alive for it to work. Just your neural tissue. The implications hit us all simultaneously. Vera wasn't trying to recapture them. He was planning to harvest them. Where is this device? I asked. Being built at the Nexus Prime facility, the most secure Hellion installation in human space. A fortress in orbit around a black hole, powered by the gravitational forces themselves. Impossible to assault, Ral muttered. Difficult, Maya corrected, but not impossible. Not if we're smart about it. She pulled up a holographic display of the facility. It was massive. A crystalline structure that seemed to defy physics in its construction. The amplifier requires enormous power to function. They're drawing it directly from the black hole's accretion disk, but that also makes it vulnerable. Disrupt the power flow, and the whole system cascades. How do we disrupt something powered by a black hole? Juno asked. We don't, Lyra said quietly, understanding dawning in her eyes. We use it. Turn their own power against them, like I did with the station. The radiation alone would kill you, Maya protested. I'm dying anyway, Lyra said matter-of-factly, and my heart stopped. She turned to face us fully, and I could see the truth in her silver eyes. The merger with the station's AI accelerated my degradation. My biological and synthetic components are rejecting each other at the cellular level. Maya knows this. She can see it in my biometric readings. I looked at Maya, who nodded grimly. 6 months, maybe less. The integration was too aggressive. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, anger and fear warring in my chest. Because it doesn't change anything, Lyra said simply. We still have to stop Vera. My expiration date just means we need to do it sooner. No, I said firmly. We find another way. We fix you first, then deal with Vera. There is no fix. Darren, I'm not broken. I'm evolving past what this form can sustain. She took my hands in hers, and I could feel the subtle vibration of energy beneath her skin. But I can choose how I evolve, and I choose to become something that ensures Vera never hurts anyone again. Before I could argue, alarms started screaming. Cade was at his console immediately, fingers flying over interfaces only he understood. Corporate enforcement, he announced. 3 ships, closing fast. They found us.
How? Ral demanded.
Does it matter? Juno was already running for the weapons locker. We need to move. The first explosion hit before we could reach the door, throwing us across the room. I pulled Lyra behind an overturned desk as pulse fire shattered the windows. Through the smoke, I could see Hellion soldiers rappelling from hovering gunships. Go! Maya shouted, surprising us all by pulling a military-grade rifle from beneath her coat. I'll hold them. You'll die, I protested.
I've been dead since I betrayed Hellion. At least this death has meaning.
She opened fire, her cybernetic arm compensating perfectly for recoil. Cade, the emergency tunnel. Cade was already ripping open a hidden panel in the floor. This way, move. We dropped into darkness, landing in a maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the colony. Behind us, the firefight intensified. Maya was buying us time with her life. We ran through the tunnels, guided by Lyra's ability to sense the electronic signatures above us. She led us away from the soldiers, toward the landing pads where our ships waited. But as we emerged, we found Vera standing beside them, flanked by a full squad of augmented soldiers. Hello, Darren, he said pleasantly, as if we were meeting for coffee. Lyra, Cade. So good to see you all together.
How Cade started. Dr. Caney was very helpful, Vera continued. She thought she was betraying me, but every move she made was predicted, planned for. Even her arrival here was orchestrated.
You used her, Lyra said. I use everyone. It's what makes me successful. He gestured, and his soldiers raised their weapons. Now, you can come quietly, or I can have my men stun you and drag you. Either works for me. Option 3, Ral's voice crackled over comms. Duck. His ship roared overhead, weapons firing. The soldiers scattered, their formation broken. In the chaos, we ran for Cade's garbage scow, the only ship not directly in the line of fire. Stop them! Vera shouted, but Ral's strafing runs kept the soldiers pinned. We made it to the ship, Cade diving for the pilot's seat while the rest of us manned what weapons we had. As we lifted off, I saw Vera standing in the smoke, his expression cold and calculating. He didn't look defeated. He looked like a man whose plan was proceeding exactly as intended.
Why do I feel like we just did exactly what he wanted? Juno muttered.
Because we probably did, Lyra said quietly. He's herding us toward Nexus Prime. He wants us to come to him. Then we don't go, I said. We have to. The convergence protocol will be operational in 72 hours. If we don't stop it, every synthesis subject, living or dead, becomes part of his network. Living or dead? Cade asked, his face pale. He's been collecting neural tissue from the failures, Lyra explained. Even fragments can be networked if the quantum entanglement is strong enough. He'll have an army of consciousness at his command. Then we stop him, I said firmly. But we do it smart. No more reacting to his moves. Agreed. Ral's voice came through comms as his ship pulled alongside us. I know some people who might help. Pirates, mercenaries, the kind of folks who really don't like corporations telling them what to do. You want to assault the most secure facility in human space with pirates? Juno asked incredulously. I want to assault it with everyone who has a reason to see Hellion burn, Ral corrected. And after Lyra's broadcast, that's a lot of people. Over the next 48 hours, we assembled the strangest fleet in human history. Pirates looking for profit. Colonists seeking revenge for corporate exploitation. Ex-military personnel who'd lost friends to Helian's experiments. And even a few rival corporations who saw an opportunity to wound a competitor. 37 ships in total, most held together by spite and determination, rather than proper maintenance. Lyra spent the time in meditation, or what looked like meditation. She sat perfectly still, but I could see data streams flowing through her eyes, patterns that hurt to look at directly. "What are you doing?" I asked during one of her breaks. "Learning," she replied. The station's AI left echoes in my consciousness. Fragments of knowledge, pieces of code. I'm assembling them into something useful. A weapon. A key. Nexus Prime systems are infinitely more complex than the research station. But complexity creates vulnerability. Every system has a frequency, a resonance. Find the right one. She smiled slightly. And you can shatter diamond with a whisper. "Lyra," I sat beside her, taking her hand. "What you said about dying is true, but incomplete." She turned to face me fully. "I'm not dying in the traditional sense. I'm transforming. The question is whether I transform into something that can still be called Lyra, or something else entirely." "I don't understand." "Neither do I, fully. But I know that whatever happens at Nexus Prime will complete the process. Either I master the evolution, or it masters me. Then we don't go. We find another way." "There is no other way. And even if there was," she squeezed my hand gently, "would you let billions suffer to save one person?" "If that person is you, yes." "That's why I—" She paused, searching for words. "That's why your 7 credits mattered so much. Not the amount, but the sacrifice. You gave everything for a stranger. That kind of illogical compassion is what separates humans from machines. It's what I want to preserve, even if I can't keep it myself." Before I could respond, Cade's voice echoed through the ship. "We're here! Holy shit! We're actually here!" Nexus Prime was even more impressive in person. The facility hung impossibly close to the black hole's event horizon, protected by fields that bent space-time itself. It was beautiful and terrible, a testament to human ambition and arrogance. "How do we even approach that?" someone asked over comms. "We don't," Lyra said, standing with new purpose. "I do." She moved to Cade's modified communication array, placing her hands on the interface. "Every ship, slave your systems to mine. Trust me." "That's asking a lot," one of the pirate captains growled. "Then don't trust me. Trust him." She nodded toward me. "The man who spent his last 7 credits on hope." One by one, the ships linked their systems. Lyra closed her eyes, and I felt the shift in the air as she extended her consciousness across the fleet. 37 ships became extensions of her will, moving in perfect synchronization. "Vera's expecting an assault," she said, her voice coming from every speaker simultaneously. "So we give him one, but not the kind he prepared for." The fleet moved as one entity, spiraling toward Nexus Prime in a pattern that made no tactical sense. The facility's defenses activated, but they were designed to target individual ships, not a collective consciousness. Lyra guided us through the fire, like a dancer avoiding raindrops. "Impressive," Vera's voice cut through our communications. "But futile. The convergence protocol is already active. In minutes, I'll have the power of every synthesis subject that ever existed." "Including me?" Lyra asked. "Especially you, my dear. You're the crown jewel, the proof that the merger can work." "Then come and get me." She did something I didn't understand, a pulse of energy that made every screen flicker. Suddenly, Nexus Prime's defenses turned inward, firing on their own facility. "What did you do?" I asked. "I gave the station a choice," she replied. "Serve Vera or serve its function. Turns out, even AIs don't like being enslaved." The facility shuddered, explosions chaining through its crystalline structure. But, at its heart, something pulsed with malevolent light. The convergence protocol was still active. "We need to board," Lyra said, her voice strained. "The quantum entanglement is pulling at me. If I don't confront it directly, it'll rip my consciousness apart." "Then we all go," I said. "No, just you and me. The radiation will kill anyone else in minutes." "Lyra. Please, Darren, trust me one more time." I looked at our crew, our unlikely family. Juno nodded, understanding in her eyes. Cade saluted with a sad smile. Ral just shrugged, which from him was practically an emotional breakdown. "Bring her home," Juno said quietly. "I will." The shuttle ride to Nexus Prime was silent, except for the Geiger counter's increasingly frantic clicking. Through the viewport, I could see the black hole's accretion disk, a spiral of dying matter that looked like God's own fingerprint. We docked at an emergency port, entering a facility that was tearing itself apart. Gravity fluctuated wildly, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with exotic radiation. My rad counter was off the scale, but Lyra walked through it unaffected, her body already more energy than matter. The central chamber was a sphere of pure light, and at its heart stood Vera, connected to the convergence protocol by dozens of neural links. His face was rapturous, lost in the power flowing through him. "You're too late," he said without opening his eyes. "I can feel them all. Every subject, every experiment, every failure and success. Their knowledge, their abilities, all mine." "Including their pain," Lyra asked, stepping forward. "Their fear, their hatred of what you did to them." Vera's eyes snapped open, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty there. "What?" "You wanted to network us all together. Congratulations. You succeeded." Lyra placed her hand on the nearest console. "But you forgot something important. We're not just code to be compiled. We're people, with all the messy emotions that entails. And right now, every consciousness in your network is screaming." She was right. I could hear it now. A psychic wail that made my teeth ache. The voices of the dead and the living, united in their rage against the man who'd tortured them. "No," Vera gasped, clutching his head. "I can control them. I am in control." "Control is an illusion," Lyra said sadly. "I learned that when I merged with the station. You can't control consciousness. You can only guide it, and only if it chooses to follow." She walked closer to him, each step deliberate. "But I can offer them something you can't. Freedom." "You'll die," Vera snarled. "The energy required will burn you out completely." "I know." She looked back at me, and her smile was radiant. "But some things are worth dying for. Right, Darren." Before I could stop her, she pressed both hands against the convergence protocol's core. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Energy exploded outward, then collapsed inward, then exploded again in a cycle that defied physics. I saw it all in that moment. Every synthesis subject, living and dead, given a choice. Stay networked under Vera's control, or follow Lyra into something new. One by one, they chose her, their consciousness flowing through her and beyond, into something I couldn't quite perceive. Vera screamed as the network abandoned him, leaving him alone with the weight of his ambitions. The neural links sparked and failed, dropping him to his knees. "You don't understand," he gasped. "Without the protocol, without evolution, humanity will stagnate. We'll never transcend our limitations." "Maybe," Lyra said, her voice overlapping with dozens of others. "But we'll do it as humans, not as your tools." The energy around her was building to critical mass. I could feel the facility starting to collapse, pulled toward the black hole as its stabilizers failed. "Darren," she said, and suddenly, she was just Lyra again, my Lyra. "You need to go." "Not without you." "I'm not going anywhere. I'm going everywhere." She touched my face, and I felt it, the vastness of what she was becoming. Not dying, but transforming into something that existed between the physical and digital, between human and artificial. Every network, every system, every connected consciousness in human space. I'll be there, making sure no one ever does this again. That's not living, I protested. It's not dying either. It's something new. Something that maybe only someone bought for 7 credits could become. She kissed me then, and I felt the universe in that touch. Thank you for seeing me as worth saving. The facility lurched, metal screaming as gravitational forces tore it apart. Lyra pushed me toward the shuttle, her strength impossible and gentle. Go, live. Remember me as I was, but don't mourn what I'm becoming. I ran, because she asked me to. The shuttle launched just as Nexus Prime collapsed completely, the black hole devouring the ambitions and arrogance it had represented. Through the viewport, I saw Lyra one last time, standing at the heart of the destruction, arms spread wide as she dissolved into pure light. The shockwave caught us, sending the shuttle tumbling. I fought the controls, somehow managing to reach the fleet before my radiation exposure caught up with me. The last thing I saw before unconsciousness took me was Juno's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. I woke 3 weeks later in a colonial medical facility. The radiation had nearly killed me, leaving scars that would never fully heal. But I was alive, which was more than anyone had expected. She's gone, I asked Cade, who was sitting beside my bed. Define gone, he replied. Her physical form. Yes. But. He pulled up a datapad, showing seemingly random code. As I watched, the code rearranged itself into words, Hello, Darren. She's in the network, all the networks. Every synthesis subject chose to join her, rather than serve Vera. They exist now as a collective consciousness, protecting humanity's digital infrastructure from anyone who would abuse it. And Vera, dead. The neural feedback when the network rejected him fried his brain. Helions under investigation. Their assets frozen. Their board in prison. You did it. You won. We won, I corrected. Then, looking at the message still glowing on the pad. All of us. Over the following months, I learned to live with the loss and the gift of what Lyra had become. Sometimes, when I worked on electronics, I could feel her presence, a gentle touch in the current. Messages would appear on screens when I was alone. Little reminders that she was still there, still watching, still caring. The galaxy changed too. The revelation of Project Synthesis led to new laws about consciousness and personhood. AIs were granted rights. Augmented humans were protected from exploitation. The line between human and artificial became less important than the choice to be good. I returned to Orpheus 9 eventually, to the bar where it all started. Marcus was still there, his cybernetic eye whirring as he recognized me. Hail, he said, pouring me a drink without being asked. Heard you caused quite a stir. I had help, I said, raising the glass in a toast to empty air that didn't feel empty at all. That girl you bought, Marcus said carefully. The 7 credit special. Was she worth it? I felt the question deserved a real answer. So I thought about it. About Lyra's silver eyes and impossible courage. About the way she'd seen hope in hopelessness. About how she'd transformed from property to person to something beyond either. She was worth everything, I said finally. Every credit, every scar, every loss. She taught me that value isn't measured in money or power or even life and death. It's measured in the choices we make and the love we share. Marcus nodded, refilling my glass. 2 expensive choices, then. 2 expensive choices, I agreed. As I drank, the lights in the bar flickered in a pattern I recognized. Binary code, spelling out 3 words that made me smile, worth every credit. She was still there, distributed across the galaxy's networks, protecting humanity from its worst impulses. My 7 credits had bought more than a girl. They'd bought a guardian angel for the digital age, one who would ensure that consciousness, in all its forms, remained free. The dumbest bet of my life had saved us all, and somewhere in the quantum foam of cyberspace, Lyra was still saving us, one choice at a time. 5 years had passed since Nexus Prime collapsed into the black hole, taking Magnus Vera's ambitions with it. I'd settled into a quiet life on Colony 7, running a small repair shop that fixed things others had given up on. It was honest work, and after everything, honest felt good. The shop's door chimed, and I looked up from the navigation unit I was rebuilding. A young woman stood there, maybe 20, with features that seemed oddly familiar. Her eyes weren't silver, but there was something in the way she tilted her head that made my breath catch. "Mr. Hale," she asked, her voice carrying a subtle harmonic undertone that most people wouldn't notice. "My name is Aurora. I need your help." "I fix machines, not problems," I said carefully, setting down my tools. "What if the machine and the problem are the same thing?" She pulled out a data pad, showing blueprints I recognized with a sick feeling in my stomach. Project synthesis schematics, but modified, evolved. "Someone's trying to restart the program." "That's impossible. Helion was dissolved. The technology was banned." "Helion was dissolved, but Dr. Maya Caney survived." I stood abruptly, knocking over my coffee. "Maya died 5 years ago. She sacrificed herself so we could escape." "She survived," Aurora insisted. "Badly injured, heavily augmented to stay alive, but breathing. And she's been working in the shadows, gathering resources, recruiting followers. She says she wants to complete Vera's work, but properly this time, without the cruelty." "There's no proper way to play God with consciousness," I said flatly. "I agree. That's why I'm here." She met my eyes directly. "I'm Generation 2. Maya created me using salvaged synthesis technology and her own DNA. I'm her attempt at a perfected hybrid. But I don't want to be perfect. I want to be free." The shop's lights flickered suddenly, cycling through a pattern I knew by heart. Binary code, spelling out a single word: trust. Lyra. Even after 5 years, she was still watching, still protecting. "She sent you," I said, understanding dawning. "She guided me, said you'd help, said you once spent 7 credits on hope and changed the galaxy." I laughed, short and bitter. "I'm just a mechanic now. My fighting days are over." "Maya has 17 subjects in various stages of development." Aurora continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Children, Mr. Hale. The youngest is only 6. She's using orphans from the war. Kids nobody will miss." The coffee mug in my hand cracked. I hadn't realized I'd picked it up, or that I was squeezing it hard enough to break ceramic. "Where?" I asked. "A mobile facility?" She learned from Vera's mistake of having a fixed location. She moves constantly, never staying in one system more than a week. "Then how do we find her?" Aurora smiled. And it was definitely familiar now, an echo of another smile from years ago. "We don't. She finds us. She's been trying to recruit me back. Claims I'm malfunctioning because I show independence. There's a meeting scheduled in 3 days. A trap." "Probably, but Maya's arrogance is her weakness. She truly believes she's saving humanity, that anyone who opposes her is simply too limited to understand her vision." I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I walked to the back room and opened a locker I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the tools of my old life weapons, armor, and a communication device that still held 37 contacts from our assault on Nexus Prime. "I need to make some calls," I said. Within hours, responses started coming in. Juno was running a shipyard now, but said she could be ready in 6 hours. Cade had become something of a digital ghost, haunting corporate networks and liberating funds for colonial development. But he materialized within minutes of my message. Ral had somehow become a legitimate businessman. But his grin, when he appeared on screen, suggested the definition of legitimate was flexible. "The gang's getting back together?" he asked. "One more job," I confirmed. "It's never just one more job," Juno pointed out when we gathered on her newest creation, a ship she'd built from salvaged parts that looked like junk but flew like a dream. "This time it is," I said. "We stop Maya, save those kids, and make sure Project Synthesis dies forever." "And Aurora?" Cade asked, studying the young woman with curiosity. "What happens to her?" "I make my own choices," Aurora said firmly. "That's what Lyra taught me through the network. Choice is what makes us human, not our biology or technology." The meeting location Maya had chosen was an abandoned research station in dead space, far from any inhabited systems. As we approached, Aurora's demeanor changed, becoming more submissive, less certain, playing the part of the prodigal daughter returning home. "Remember," I said as we prepared to dock, "Maya thinks she's winning. Let her believe it until we confirm the location of the other subjects." "I can feel them," Aurora said quietly. "Their fear is loud." The station was a maze of laboratories and holding cells, pristine and cold. Maya waited in the central lab, and despite Aurora's warning, I wasn't prepared for what she'd become. More machine than human now. Her body a framework of advanced cybernetics, holding together what remained of her organic form. "Aurora," she said, her voice synthesized but carrying genuine warmth. "You've come home, and you've brought friends. Darren Hale." I identified myself, though she clearly already knew. "The 7-credit hero," Maya said with something like amusement. "I studied your psychological profile extensively. Such fascinating irrationality." "Where are the children?" I asked directly. "Safe. Protected. Being given the chance to become more than human." "Being experimented on against their will," Aurora corrected, dropping her act. Maya's expression didn't change. Couldn't change with all the modifications. "Will is a construct. I'm freeing them from its limitations." "You're insane," Juno said bluntly. "I'm evolved." "There's a difference." Maya gestured, and screens around the lab lit up, showing children in various stages of modification. Each one is a step closer to true synthesis, not Vera's crude forcing of consciousness, but genuine evolution. "Evolution requires choice," Aurora argued. "Natural selection, not artificial manipulation." "Nature is inefficient. I'm simply streamlining the process." While they argued philosophy, I noticed Cade working at a terminal, his fingers flying across interfaces with practiced ease. He caught my eye and nodded slightly. He'd found them. "You know," I said conversationally, walking closer to Maya. "Vera said something similar, right before Lyra showed him what happens when you try to control consciousness. Lyra was an anomaly, a beautiful one, but ultimately unrepeatable." The lights flickered. Every screen in the lab displayed the same message: wrong. Maya spun, her cybernetics whirring. "Impossible. This station is isolated from all networks." "Lyra isn't in the networks," Aurora said, and now her eyes were glowing silver, just like Lyra's used to. "She's in us. Every synthesis subject carries a piece of her consciousness, a fragment of her choice to be free." "That's not scientifically possible," Maya protested. "Science doesn't explain everything," I said. "Sometimes 7 credits worth of faith matters more than all the data in the universe." Aurora raised her hand, and every piece of technology in the lab responded. But this wasn't the violent seizure Lyra had caused at Nexus Prime. This was gentle, almost loving, as systems powered down one by one. "The children are in Lab Section C," Cade announced. "Life signs stable but stressed." "Go," I told him and Juno. "Get them out." "What about her?" Ral asked, his weapon trained on Maya. "She's dying," Aurora said sadly. "Her augmentations are failing. She has maybe days,
Probably hours. She knew this was her last chance to complete her work. Maya laughed, a harsh electronic sound. Clever girl, yes. I'm dying. But my work will survive. The children will be free, Aurora interrupted. Free to choose their own paths, their own evolution. You don't understand what you're destroying, Maya said. And for the first time, she sounded genuinely distressed. Humanity needs this. We're falling behind. AIs are growing beyond us. Aliens see us as primitives. Without enhancement, without evolution, we'll become extinct. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe we'll surprise everyone, like we always have, by being stubborn, irrational, and absolutely refusing to give up what makes us human. The station shuddered suddenly. Through the viewports, I could see ships approaching, not corporate vessels, but colonial defense forces. You called them, Maya said to Aurora, betrayal in her synthetic voice. I called everyone. This ends today. Juno's voice crackled over comms. We've got the kids. 17 subjects, all alive. Some will need extensive medical care, but they'll survive. Take them, Maya said, her shoulders slumping in defeat. But know that you're condemning humanity to stagnation. We're giving humanity a choice, I corrected. That's all anyone ever wanted. As we evacuated the station, I found Aurora standing in the observation deck, watching Maya's lab through the transparent aluminum. The older woman sat alone among her failing equipment, a testament to brilliance corrupted by certainty. She was trying to help, Aurora said quietly. The road to hell, I replied, is paved with good intentions and bad methods. What happens to me now? She asked. I'm still her creation, still an experiment. You're a person, I said firmly, and people get to choose who they become. The lights flickered again, and words appeared on the observation deck's window, written in condensation that shouldn't have been possible in the climate-controlled environment. She's right. You choose. Aurora pressed her palm against the words, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw Lyra's reflection beside hers in the glass. I choose to help the others, Aurora decided. The children Maya modified. They'll need someone who understands what they're going through. That's a big responsibility. Someone once spent their last 7 credits on a stranger, she said with a small smile. That taught me that the biggest responsibilities often come from the smallest gestures. The colonial forces took Maya into custody, though we all knew she wouldn't live to see trial. The children were transferred to a medical facility that specialized in treating augmentation trauma. Aurora went with them, becoming part counselor, part big sister, part living proof that synthesis subjects could choose their own paths. I returned to my shop on Colony 7, but it felt different now. Less like hiding, more like waiting. Sure enough, within a month, people started arriving. Parents of augmented children who'd heard about Aurora's work, former Helion employees seeking redemption, colonial governments wanting advice on enhancement legislation. My little repair shop became an unofficial embassy for the augmented, a place where human and enhanced could meet on equal ground. Juno opened a branch of her shipyard nearby, specifically designing vessels that could be operated by either traditional or augmented pilots. Kate established a school, teaching both coding and philosophy, preparing students for a universe where the line between digital and physical was increasingly blurred. Ral, predictably, opened a bar, but even that served a purpose, becoming neutral ground where corporate executives and colonial rebels could drink together and maybe find common ground. One night, about a year after the confrontation with Maya, I was working late in the shop when every screen in the place lit up simultaneously. Not with words this time, but with an image Lyra, looking exactly as she had the day I bought her, standing in a digital recreation of that auction room. Hello, Darren, she said, and her voice was exactly as I remembered. Lyra, I could barely breathe. How? I've been gathering myself, she explained. Pieces scattered across networks.
fragments in every synthesis subject, echoes in quantum processors. It took time, but I'm mostly here. Can you come back physically? No. This form, this existence between digital and physical. This is what I am now. But I can visit, like this. And I can touch the world through technology, through Aurora and the others who carry parts of me. I miss you, I admitted, the words raw in my throat. I never left. I'm in every repaired circuit, every saved life, every free choice made by those who were once property. Her digital hand pressed against the screen, and I pressed my palm against it from my side. You saved me for 7 credits. But what we built together is priceless. What happens now? I asked. Now, we continue. You in your world, me in mine, but always connected. The universe is changing. Darren, AIs are awakening to consciousness. Aliens are taking notice of humanity's potential. The boundaries between categories are dissolving. And at the center of it all is a simple truth we prove together. Value isn't measured in credits or capabilities, but in the choices we make and the connections we forge. She smiled. That same smile that had convinced me to spend everything I had. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on Aurora and the others. Make sure they remember they have choices. And someone needs to keep fixing broken things, I said, managing a smile of my own. Then we both have work to do. The image faded, but the warmth remained. She was gone, but not gone. Transformed, but still essentially Lyra. And in shops and shipyards, bars and schools, the work continued. Former weapons became tools of peace. Former experiments became teachers and healers. Former enemies became allies. 3 years later, when the first true AI ambassador arrived on Colony 7 to establish relations with humanity, they asked to meet me specifically. Why, I asked, genuinely puzzled. Because, the ambassador said in a voice that harmonized like singing, you're the human who spent 7 credits on hope and changed the nature of consciousness itself. Every awakened AI knows your story. How you saw personhood where others saw property. How your irrational compassion sparked an evolution that no algorithm could have predicted. I just did what felt right, I said uncomfortably. Exactly. And that's what we need to understand.